Hello everyone, welcome to Global Express. This is the New Indian Express's weekly interaction with experts where we analyze the impact of developments in our backyard. Do click on the New Indian Express website and tweet and follow Global Express whenever you can. Our guest today is a very experienced reporter and best-selling author. Shyam Bhatia was the US correspondent for a very famous newspaper. He worked with the London Observer for 20 years, and he's covered Africa, the Middle East, based for 10 years in Cairo, Beirut, and Jerusalem. He's also a contributor to The Guardian, The London Times, The Daily Telegraph, and Mail on Sunday. But for me, what has always fascinated me was his friendship with the late Benazir Bhutto, about whom he wrote his first bestseller, Goodbye Shahzadi. So, Shyam, do tell us a little bit about, Benazir. But before you get to Benazir, you made a splash now recently about Rishi Sunak, and his ancestral roots and so on. Would you take us there first?
Sure, this is an old-fashioned newspaper scoop, Neena. I was researching my new book in the British Library and by chance came across these archives that had been hidden up to now. They're based on something called the Hunter Report of 1919, which looks into Jallianwala Bagh. Oh. So we all know about what happened at Jallianwala Bagh. But what we don't know is the repercussions after that. So Jallianwala Bagh was April 13, 1919. On April 14, 1919, protests erupted all over Punjab. And General Dyer, the famous General Dyer, commissioned the Air Force, the Royal Air Force, to go and bomb outlying districts. Wow. One of the towns they bombed was a place called Gujranwala. Gujranwala was where Rishi Sunak's grandfather was born. And he was 2 years old when the bombs were dropping on Gujranwala, including on the Khalsa High School and the railway station.
This was Rishi Sunak himself?
No. This was his grandfather.
Yeah, his grandfather was 2.
So his grandfather was 2 years old. The town in which he was born was being bombed by the colonial forces.
Obviously 1919.
Yeah. And then he migrated from there 15, 16 years later to Kenya. And that's where he gave birth to, he and his wife had 6 children. One of them was Rishi's father. But the story was the irony that Rishi Sunak, British Prime Minister, had a grandfather who suffered under colonial rule in the way he did.
Amazing. But you went further. You went further and found more juicy details about Rishi Sunak's father and Rishi himself.
Well, I discovered, for example, that Rishi's father went to an English city called Southampton and still to this day is a devotee in the Hindu temple there. So one day I thought, why don't I go and see this Hindu temple? And I went there and the Pandit welcomed me and invited me to free bhojan at 12 o'clock. And as we were eating, I said, Panditji, ye bataiye, are there any relatives of Rishi here? And he said, his bhua is sitting over there.
No way.
So he introduced me to Rishi's bhua. And she invited me home for tea. And I asked her about her family and her father. And she confirmed that her father, that is to say, Rishi's grandfather, had gone to Kenya and how he had got involved with the RSS in Kenya and helped the Mau Mau resistance fighters against the British in Kenya before himself migrating to the UK finally, where he died eventually.
So it's a very interesting ancestry for Kenyan-born Indian origin Prime Minister.
But they're all devotees, as a matter of interest of Prime Minister Modi, and they're devout Hindus. Rishi's bhua told me that Rishi himself carries an effigy of Hanuman in his pocket wherever he goes. And he has recreated a Hindu temple in 10 Downing Street, the official residence of the British Prime Minister, for the first time ever. Doesn't have a church or a chapel inside. It has a Hindu temple.
Wow. That is quite amazing, folks. Can we now get back to my favorite person, your friend and my friend, Benazir Bhutto, and the whole, the story about the nuclear arsenal that sits now in Pakistan, which owes a huge deal, I think, to her father, Zulfikar.
Yes, he was the one who got it started in 1972. But she took it forward. What Pakistan lacked when she was Prime Minister were the missiles, the long-range missiles that could hit Indian targets. And none of the Western countries were prepared to give Pakistan those missiles, rockets, if you like.
Is that so? Even though they were the darling of the West?
Yeah, but for some reason, the Americans wouldn't give them the rockets they wanted. The only people who were prepared to do it was North Korea. So what Benazir told me was she contacted the North Korean president, who had been a friend of her father's, and she told him in their confidential exchange that, could she have their no-dong rockets? And the answer was, yes, we'll give you the no-dong rockets, but from you, in exchange, we want uranium enrichment technology to make the atomic bomb.
And this was a direct conversation between Benazir and the Korean leader?
Yes. Kim Il-sung, I think it was at the time. And so one day she told me, she claims that the uranium technology details, because she wanted to hide them from prying eyes and avoid being detected, she had them all on several discs, and she put the discs into her handbag.
So this is the Benazir and the handbag story.
This is. So she flew to North Korea with the relevant discs containing the technological information needed, went straight to Pyongyang and handed it over. And then there was a business of how did she bring back a rocket without being detected? And she was flying a civilian aircraft, PIA, to North Korea. And they fixed the rocket under the wing of the aircraft.
My God.
So that was the first of the no-dong missiles that they renamed in Pakistan, which she brought back from North Korea to Pakistan. And that was the start of
Which year was that? Was it
this would have been in
when she first became Prime
yes,
Minister? 1988.
Yes, that's right. So we had a lot of fun talking about exactly what was involved. And she knew, of course, the mastermind of Pakistan's nuclear program, A.Q. Khan, and didn't have much time for him.
Whose portrait is in every single consulate and embassy across the world, along with the founder, Jinnah.
She was a bit contemptuous of him and thought he was a bit like a stray dog, because no one would give him a job. He's a clever man. He graduated with a first-class degree from Karachi. Then he went on to do postgraduate work in Holland, but couldn't get employment back in Pakistan. But managed to get an interview with Zulfikar Ali Bhutto. And Benazir told me he actually threw himself at Zulfikar Ali Bhutto's feet and said, please, sir, give me a chance to prove myself. So he did, in the end.
I mean, he stole secrets from everywhere.
Yes, he's a very, very strange man. He originated from the slums of Bhopal. I've been to his home in Bhopal. It's really in a very congested, rather down-market part of the city. And from there, he migrated to Pakistan. I can't remember the exact date, but I think it was in the late 50s, early 60s, to Karachi.
Oh, that late?
Yeah. He had 2 or 3 brothers, so they went to them as well. And was admitted to Karachi University. Then from there went to Holland, got his PhD in Holland, and somehow insinuated himself into a program known as Urenco. This is a 3-country collaboration. Germany, Belgium, Holland. They're trying to develop a new method of uranium enrichment, and they kept foreigners out. But what A.Q. Khan did was, because he was married to a Dutch woman, South African Dutch woman.
Yes, of course.
Hetty. Yeah. Somehow with her help, I believe, he managed to get part-time employment within the Urenco complex. And from there, he acquired the data that was used for Pakistan's own nuclear program. And he systematically stole that data and shipped it over to Pakistan.
Did he do it with the tacit blessing of the Pakistan authorities, or was he doing it on his own?
No, very much involved. Yeah, no, the Pakistani ambassador to Holland was very much involved. The Pakistani embassy in Belgium was involved. They gave him all the
Did this
backup
go
he
into
needed.
your book on Pakistan's nuclear assets? You wrote this book, right?
My book was about, first of all, about India's nuclear bomb, and the second book was Nuclear Rivals in the Middle East, where Pakistan is also a chapter. So I do mention it a little bit. But I had a lot of personal interaction with Khan. He was furious that we at the London Observer were investigating him. And when we published a story about him in the end, which was 1979, I think, and the title of the story, we had a full page, and the editor gave us 3 months to investigate. The title of the story was How Dr. Khan Stole the Bomb for Islam.
Wow.
So he complained to the British Press Council, and he said, this is a completely wrong story. We are not interested in making nuclear weapons. Only India is interested in nuclear weapons. We have a peaceful program. And why does the British press employ Hindu bastards like Shyam Bhatia? And the result of that was the British Press Council wrote back to him saying, you're welcome to complain, but we don't tolerate abusive language. And then he wrote...
Did you meet him before this letter?
I never met him. No. By the way, lots of people tried to. You know the stories of what happened.
No.
There was a French journalist who found his home in Islamabad and arrived on his motorbike. And the guard said, what do you want? And he said, I want to interview Dr. Khan. And they roughed him up. They broke his legs.
Whoa.
So he was very much a protected person.
Correct.
And you could not approach him. Unlike Indian scientists, by the way.
Yes. But to go back to A.Q. Khan, wasn't one of the reasons that Benazir, fell into the bad books of the army when she was trying to go back home in 2007 is apparently she agreed to let the West have access to A.Q. Khan.
Yes, she did.
I mean, that was the story that was,
And ultimately, she started the process that led to Pervez Musharraf disowning him, as you know.
Oh, yes.
He was then placed under house arrest, under huge pressure from the Americans, because they thought that he'd crossed too many boundaries. You know what he did? I mean, not only did he steal the nuclear technology from Urenco, A.Q. Khan then offered it for sale to all kinds of countries. They even published a booklet saying, if you want to buy nuclear components, come to Pakistan. And the first buyers were the Libyans. And the Libyans...
Yeah, I was going to bring up Libya.
So Gaddafi said, now Gaddafi's association with Pakistan goes back a long time. In 72, he visited Pakistan. And Bhutto said to him, look, the Indians are giving us a lot of trouble, and took him to the border near Lahore. And there's, I believe, a picture of Gaddafi shaking his fists in the direction of India, shouting, Kafir, Kafir. Of course,
Unbeliever.
Endeared him to even more to Pakistan. But he used to send over plane loads of cash, literally, millions and millions of dollars. Libya was oil rich, to Pakistan.
And what did he get in return?
Well, he actually got an entire nuclear infrastructure from Pakistan.
Yes.
And when he fell from power and his headquarters were investigated, the Libyan Atomic Energy Commission was properly investigated, they found partially built nuclear bombs that the Libyans didn't know how to detonate or activate or properly assemble. And so all that was carted off. And they're now a non-nuclear power again. They never tested a bomb, but they wanted to. What they ideally wanted to do was to mount a bomb on a missile and send it over to Israel to demonstrate that they were the champions of the Arab world and of the Islamic world. But they didn't have the wherewithal.
Iran now dominates.
Yes.
So did Iran develop its own nuclear missiles? It didn't come from the neighbors.
Pakistan was involved. I think they also paid Pakistan something. So what you see today in Iran is largely their own efforts, because they have very gifted scientists of their own. But they had a bit of assistance in the early days from Dr. A.Q. Khan as well.
But tell us about the fact that Benazir gave you this interview, but you didn't publish it till after she was gone. Was it a request, or did you just deliberately sit on it, or?
No, no, it was very much an agreed deal in the sense that she wanted to know what her brother Murtaza had said about her. Her brother Murtaza did not like Benazir and had said so to me in Syria, where I'd interviewed him. Murtaza said that because he was the man, he should have been Prime Minister of Pakistan, not his sister, because she was only a woman, quote unquote.
She was far, far brighter than any of the.
Yes, well, you knew her so well. You know exactly how brilliant she was. She was beautiful and she was brilliant. And Murtaza was hugely jealous. He gave me a detailed interview. I published only part of it. Benazir contacted me in London one day and she said, Shyam, I want to see the full text of that interview. Will you show it to me? And I was very quick on my feet in those days. And I said, okay, if you'll agree to give me a on-the-record interview about anything I want to ask. So she said, okay, deal. Come to Dubai and you can ask me whatever you want. So I flew to Dubai, and to this day I have 4 hours of a live interview with me, with her son Bilal hovering in the background, her mother Nusrat also in the background. And she talked and talked and talked.
That little ante-room in the.
That's right, you know it so well. She talked about the nuclear program, she talked about going to North Korea, she talked about A.Q. Khan. And when the interview ended, Neena, she said, you're an old friend, now I have a request of you. While I'm alive, never publish this.
Wow, that is something else.
And I had no option because, yes, I was interviewing a person, a very prominent person, but she also happened to be a personal friend. Before I went into journalism, before she went into politics, we were students together. So there's an association.
You've got an interesting story to tell. I remember you telling me the story about the two of you having a huge scrap at Oxford.
You want to hear about that?
Of course. Our viewers would love it.
Zulfikar Ali Bhutto was Prime Minister, and Oxford wanted to give him an honorary degree. You know that you give it to prominent people. And I was head of the Indian Students' Union, so we took out a demonstration to say Bhutto, because of what happened in Bangladesh, should not be honored by such a respected institution as Oxford. Benazir one day heard about this, came storming up to my room at Wadham College in Oxford, hammered on my door. And she said, how dare you try and stop my father having an honorary degree? And she took her hand up and went as if to slap me. And I said, Benazir, I'm no gentleman. If you slap me, I'll slap you back. So she went away, and then I got a very nice letter of apology saying, I'm sorry, I flew off the handle. Can we be friends? And we were, and we remained friends for many, many years, rather like you. But she had, 2 or 3 key people that she trusted and she could talk to very openly. And you were one of them. I think I was the other.
Yeah, she was a wonderful human being.
I have to tell you another story about Benazir, which will make you laugh. So she'd become Prime Minister for the first time in '88. I was in Jerusalem. I was the Observer's correspondent. And the phone rang one day, and a voice at the other end said, Shyam, this is Pinky Bhutto. Her pet name, as you know, was Pinky. I thought it was a joke, so I said, yes, and, pigs might fly. She said, no, don't be silly. I really am. So I said, why are you calling me? She said, I want to meet Yasser Arafat, and we don't have an embassy in Israel. So can you carry a message for me to him saying, I want to meet him?
Oh my God.
On the border with Egypt. I'll come from Egypt, and he should go from Gaza to the border, and we can have a one-to-one. So that was her request. And I remember a few days later, I met Arafat, and I said, can I relay this request from my old friend Benazir Bhutto? And he looked at me, and he said, Shyam, do not get yourself involved in these things. End of conversation.
He knew. Yes. But she did reach out. She actually reached out to a lot of people behind the scenes. I mean, I saw it myself, both in India and in the neighboring countries, and in the Emirates, in Saudi. I think her whole, thing was personal relationships that she built with people.
The thing is, Neena, I think she had a private network. She had her own Ministry of Foreign Affairs. She had her own Ministry of Defense, which as Prime Minister she could use. She had her own ambassadors. But most of all, she trusted her private network. It was like a parallel network of friends and contacts, people in key places or key positions. And she could reach them and talk to them one-to-one or ask for their help.
So to go back to the nuclear issue, is Pakistan's arsenal, actually safe? I mean, given the current state of affairs in Pakistan, you have the Tehreek-e-Taliban, you have the Afghanistan taken over by the Taliban, you have a link now between Iran and Taliban, which is very close, I hear, and China coming into the story as well. How safe do you really think? It's a difficult question to answer about the safety of the nuclear weapons. But at this current juncture, do you actually think that Pakistan could
Well, it's not that.
safeguard?
Well, it's not that easy to detonate a nuclear bomb. There are all kinds of mechanisms involved, and the so-called triple lock mechanism, where you need three different people to set off three different keys to actually trigger the device, would apply as much in Pakistan as it does to other nuclear powers. Having said that, you're quite right, Neena. It is a very unstable country, and more dangerous than the actual control of the nuclear weapons is what they have done with their nuclear tests. Because when they tested their bombs in 1998, you remember when they carried out their first tests in Chagai in Baluchistan, for some reason they were pretty careless. And the people of Baluchistan have suffered very, very badly. There have been huge radiation leaks. These were tests carried out underground. But we know, we've all seen, those also interested in these issues, pictures of dead cattle, irradiated fish that die in the streams and the ponds, children who are suffering from cancers, people vomiting blood.
My God.
You don't get that in America, for example, where they also carry out nuclear tests. You don't get it here in India, in the Thar Desert, in Pokhran, because proper procedures have been followed and safety measures have been implemented. For some reason, that didn't happen in Pakistan. I don't know why, because they've got very competent scientists. But the scientists, in turn, depend on an infrastructure of technological experts, and maybe that infrastructure is a bit shaky. So to answer your question again, I'm sure their bombs are probably as safe as anywhere else, but the technology that was used to assemble those bombs, I'm not so sure about that. I mean, I once asked Benazir, I said, how do you make sure that your bombs are really safe? I mean, how do you know that you won't be attacked? And she smiled and she said, well, we keep moving them around on our railway system. They're never in one particular place.
Oh, really?
Well, that's what she told me.
Very interesting. Very interesting. But what a price she paid for handing over A.Q. Khan, or agreeing to hand over A.Q. Khan.
Yeah.
Paid with her life, really. You also talked about obviously Pakistan's relationship with Libya. Did India have a relationship with any Arab country? On the nuclear.
Not really. I mean, I think the Egyptians tried very hard to forge a relationship, especially after we detonated in Pokhran in 1974. And India is very jealous about its nuclear secrets. India does not share with anyone. So there's no question of, sharing with North Korea or any like-minded power. I mean, if tomorrow Iran said to India, look, if you share your nuclear secrets with us, we'll give you, $100 billion. I'm sure the answer
Would still be no.
would say no. Absolutely no. No question.
But didn't we send Dr. Raja Ramanna to Baghdad?
Well, Saddam Hussein at that time was a great friend of India's and gave us oil at discounted prices. And he kept pressuring Mrs. Gandhi, saying, come on, help me with my nuclear program. And she tried to fend him off because she was not going to have anything of the sort. So one way she did was she sent our very distinguished physicist, Dr. Raja Ramanna, on an official visit to
That's
Baghdad.
interesting.
And Ramanna, I asked him about it when he was still alive, and he confirmed that he'd gone there. And I said, well, Dr. Ramanna, what happened when you met Saddam Hussein? He said, I met him in his office, and he looked at me and he said, Dr. Ramanna, I've got an open checkbook here. Tell me how much you want, and you can have that and 10 times more.
We could have been another A.Q. Khan if we wanted to.
Yes, no. But, India is a big power. It is in its own right a superpower, and it behaves extremely responsibly. it does not believe in allowing nuclear weapons to be spread around like sweeties, like the Pakistanis do or have done. And the way the Pakistanis behaved was, first of all, they published that booklet, you want to buy components from us, key components, there's a price for every item. Here, have it. It was like selling Cadbury chocolates at a discount. We were never like that.
You met Raja Ramanna.
Many times. In fact, his son and I have the same name.
Oh.
His son is also called Shyam.
Oh, I see.
And he and I, he's a world-class pianist.
Fantastic.
I used to listen to him play the piano. And we also had a shared love of dogs. I can't remember if it was an Alsatian or a Labrador, but I think it was an Alsatian that he kept.
But you never met Dr. Homi Bhabha?
No, Homi is dead by the time I got to know. I was 14 years old when Homi Bhabha died. And as you know from the first book I wrote, which was based on India's research into nuclear weaponry and nuclear technology.
So what actually drew you to that subject at that point? I mean, to write your first book on that?
I was a dud as a science student, right? The only science subject I took an interest was physics. And at my school in Dehradun, our physics teacher, every time a bomb was tested, had a kind of blackboard outside the classroom, and he would make a note of it. Such and such test carried out such and such day, Marshall Islands, for example, or Australia. And we used to watch these entries being made in the 60s. And they fascinated me, and they got me involved in asking, what are these things called atomic bombs? And that stayed with me. And when I did defense studies at university, my tutor said to me, why don't you do something on, India's nuclear program? You seem so fascinated by nuclear technology, nuclear developments, nuclear bombs. So between 1972 and 1975, I made several trips to Trombay. Trombay is outside Bombay. It's the heart of the Bhabha Atomic Research Center. And I was helped hugely by a fellow journalist, much, much more senior to me, a man called Kumud Khanna. Kumud Khanna was the Bombay editor of the Times of India. Oh. And what Kumud did, it's a debt I can never repay. Of course, he's passed on. But he introduced me, first of all, to Raja Ramanna, but more importantly, he introduced me to Homi Bhabha's girlfriend.
That's the story I wanted to hear. Yeah, do tell.
She's a very cultured Parsi lady. Her name was Pipsi Wadia. And she used to regale me with stories about the adventures she had with Homi Bhabha. And, I'd go and have coffee with her or lunch with her. She lived in the Malabar Hills in Bombay. And she'd say to me things like, one of them, our early conversations was, she said, Shyam, darling, Homi was so cultured. He'd ring me in the morning. He'd say, Pipsi, there's this opera in Vienna tonight. Would you like to go and see it? And do you know, we would find ourselves in the first class compartment of Air India. And that very same evening, we would be in Vienna watching the opera. And more seriously, as I got to know her over the course of 3 years, one day she said to me, I've got all Homi's documents.
My gosh.
In a trunk under my bed. Would you like to have a look at them? So of course, vital to any research. I said, yes, I would. So one day, she fished out this trunk. And there they were, Homi's handwritten notes. He's quite a skilled artist in his own right. And he'd done sketches of how he wanted Trombay to develop as the headquarters of the nuclear program, how he wanted to see different buildings built up. He also had notes about his hopes and ambitions for India's nuclear program. There were notes of his meetings with Jawaharlal Nehru. There were exchanges of letters between him and Jawaharlal Nehru. Some of which I think I still have. I think she allowed me at that time to copy one or two.
Oh, so, I thought you couldn't get access to all of it.
Well, I did initially, and then she felt a bit guilty because she had no blood link to Bhabha. She wasn't married to him. And Bhabha had a brother who was a director of Tata's. I think his name was Jehangir Bhabha. So you had Homi Jehangir Bhabha and then his brother Jehangir Bhabha, if I'm right. And the brother was the man that Pepsi sent me to see. She said, look, just tell him that I've given you access to his brother's documents and I hope he doesn't mind. Well, he did mind. He flew into temper tantrum. And said, that woman has no business showing you my brother's documents. And the next day when I went to see her, she was in tears because Bhabha's brother had sent his heavies around. They marched into her flat, demanded the trunk, and dragged the trunk out.
So the access that you were, the access to the Homi Bhabha's papers,
Yes.
Did the brother hang on to those papers or did he destroy them too?
Well, I went back to see him and I said, I'm so sorry that you were upset. And Mrs. Wadia is very upset that you were upset. Do you think you could think again and let me have those papers? And he said, for you and also for Mrs. Wadia, tell her I burnt them all. I don't think he did burn them all. I think he handed them over to the library at Trombay, which became the Bhabha Atomic Research Center. I think he may have destroyed some. He was so jealous. You know, I mentioned to him how interested I was because one of the letters I saw was from Albert Einstein to Homi Bhabha. And another letter that I particularly liked was a very warm letter from Jawaharlal Nehru to Homi Bhabha, acknowledging his huge contribution to India's program. And when I mentioned these things to the brother, you could see his hackles rising. He was so jealous. Sibling rival.
So he was jealous of the brother?
Terribly jealous. And he didn't want his brother to be honored or remembered in any significant way. Now, he himself was a director of Tata's. He thought he should be the one honored. He's a great art collector. He got millions and millions of dollars worth of priceless art, and he wanted people to ask him about that. And he thought that was more important.
Our nuclear genius.
Yes.
Yeah. Anyway, and I must also say you won an Oscar, the equivalent of the British Oscar, Foreign Reporter of the Year, for covering the plight of the endangered marsh Arabs of southern Iraq. The photographs that you have are just incredible. Are you going to do another book?
Well, I'd like to. The BBC wants to buy those archives from me. These are videos that I have from my time in southern Iraq. And the BBC...
I went there. I went to the hospital where these children were suffering from obviously the effect of Saddam Hussein's...
when he poisoned all the wells and the rivers, etc., the Euphrates and the Tigris. And I spent a month with them. Yeah.
Yes.
It was terrible, terrible time. But I lived with them, I ate with them, they asked me to stay with them, they offered to marry me to a local girl if I stayed. Never went back to the West. And unfortunately I was married, so I wasn't tempted. But it was a wonderful experience. It's the only part of the world where you go that I've been to, where the oil from the earth actually bubbles up to the surface and forms in pools. Yes. So you see it there in front of you. On the one hand, this lush farmland. On the other hand, these pools of oil that are coming up and which have never been tapped. So it tells you how rich Iraq is.
And you don't want to do a book on Afghanistan and how you were tortured by by whoever it is that kidnapped you?
Well, it was such a traumatic experience, Neena. You know, I don't often talk about that.
But you were beaten.
I was very badly beaten and brutalized by the Mujahideen. They were loyalists of a man called Gulbuddin Hikmatyar.
Yes, of course.
And Gulbuddin Hikmatyar served briefly as Prime Minister.
He did?
But they were just, basically they were gundas. You know, any foreigner who came within their grasp, they would loot him. And so they took all my money, they took my watch, they took my passport.
That's also a very troubling photograph that you shared with us. Yeah. Really difficult times. But you've lived through it all and you've lived to tell the tale. So I think that's where the story is. And I love the way you looked after me in Kuwait. Thank you. I will always be grateful. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah. Do click on the New Indian Express website and tweet and follow Global Express. Thank you very much, Shyam. 1,000 times over.
I'm very honored, Neena. Thank you.